timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. And Miriam was a weaver of unique variety. The tapestry she wove was one which sang our history. With every strand and every thread she crafted her delight. A woman touched with spirit, she dances toward the light. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song.
I'm Marilyn Landy. I'm here to share the Creative Legacy, a story of Jewish women and their history through the visual arts. This program combines written data with visual objects in order to help us restructure our view of Jewish women's lives. Two questions that need to be asked are, what is historically significant from a woman's point of view? And how do we reinvest value into women's work, especially since it is so familiar to us? This presentation will be narrated by Susan Witkin.
The creative legacy of Jewish women in history is evident through the visual arts. 20th century Jewish women artists have contributed to this story. Their contemporary art has been interspersed with historical visuals. The fertility goddess represents to many the major role women played in ensuring Jewish survival. For new perspectives, we need to look beyond previous interpretations. We need to redefine which aspects of Jewish history have been deemed significant for women, regardless of the sparsity of historical written data. To gain new insights into women's contributions to Judaism, we need to view many aspects of many eras. Inscriptions of early synagogues indicate that some women functioned in leadership roles, such as president. Biblical clues exist concerning women's lives in terms of handiworks and textiles. Women were creators of textiles for the home, temple, and synagogues, and Israel was known for excelling in these productions. Weaving was a necessity in domestic work and life, and wealthy women were also engaged in wool spinning. In the Talmud and books of later eras, references are made to the decorative arts and materials inside Jewish homes. Specifically referred to are wall paintings, floor mosaics, sculpted objects, and household artifacts. Women were essential to the workforce that made their society and were central figures in the survival of the Jewish civilization. From the 9th to 11th century in the Mediterranean society, documents describe women's lives as active, educated, and socially involved. A woman's wedding contract, called the ketubah, detailed the obligations of the groom to his bride. In many cases, money earned by the bride was stipulated to belong to her and to be spent as she saw fit. The ketubah was kept by the bride, and the dowry was repaid upon a divorce or widowhood. Many dowries listed linens, clothing, household goods, carpets and hangings, and bridal items. Physical evidence of eras gone by are rare. Even rarer are manuscripts with scenes of women. Domestic materials combined with ritual objects made a strong visual impact in the household. The overall culture in which Jews lived influenced their lives, as seen in their costumes. The ritual of nidah, immersion, sometimes as in Italy, was a source of conflict. Women would not use the mikveh if they suspected male eyes. Two other obligations of Judaism for women included the mitzvot of Halah, a ceremony to remember the destruction of the temple, and the lighting of the Sabbath candles. Other mitzvot involved kashrut, daily prayers, Sabbath ceremonies, and charity. Women were continually involved in acts of service and preserving traditions, proving that the home was the center of a popular domestic religion. Rabbinic writings have recorded women, widows, and spinsters who worked in shawl and thread making in Krakow, 1485. Other written documents tell of women creatively involved in textiles, from spinning to the art of design. In Poland, 1590, a well-known businesswoman donated 3 cloaks to the synagogue. She suggested they be used for charity or for covering the Torah desk. In Spain and Italy, Jewish women of the upper classes received Renaissance educations, while formal Jewish educations were available to very few. In North Africa, after the Inquisition, Jews were limited to crafts, a few being those of the metalsmiths, gold and silversmiths, silk weavers, and painters. In the usual manner, wives of shopkeepers or craftsmen worked alongside their husbands. A textile workshop was found in almost every home in Salonika in the 1500s. The head of the family worked with his wife and children. Continued responsibility was placed on the wife and mother for ceremonial observances in the home, such as Passover. Jewish women played a major role in the development of Jewish folk art, which evolved out of these necessities: home life, furnishings, and ceremonies. Regardless of women's roles in preserving and transforming the culture, Jewish male literary figures were, and often still are, in conflict when making up their minds and attitudes concerning women. Some copyists and scribes were women, although they did not work on Torah scrolls. After 1616, Yiddish books became immensely popular among Ashkenazic women. These works were a source for spirituality and education, as well as entertainment. Many women wrote their own prayers, takinas, while sometimes developing their own prayer groups. Prayers that sanctified daily acts, pregnancy, childbirth, the new moon, immersion, and prayers for the dead were found in these books. The concept of the working woman is not a late 20th century invention, for women have worked for centuries as co-partners in workshops, as accountants for their husbands, and as managers of other businesses. From 1600 to 1800, there were also other handicrafts, such as Adarat, lace, ceramics, painting on linen, and wooden crafts. Jewish craft guilds began in the 17th century, included women, boys, and girls. In Ashkenazic Europe, a custom called spinholz, traced to Talmudic times, was celebrated. On the Sabbath, prior to a girl's wedding, she was to prove she was a good sewer or weaver, and all were invited to watch. Eileen Potashnik, a granddaughter of weavers of Tomashev of Poland, works in their tradition. In all aspects, physically, economically, culturally, and aesthetically, women were significant to the survival of the Jewish people. One of the earliest signed works we know of is this Torah curtain, created and donated by Solomon and Golda Perlsticker, 1592. Their work was further enhanced and signed 2 years later by their son Pinchas and daughter-in-law Gittel. Many ritual items could be found in a Jewish home: Kiddush cups, goblets, Sabbath covers and lamps, challah covers, prayer books, decanters and spice boxes, wall hangings and amulets, prayer shawls, mezuzahs, illuminated manuscripts, and kippot. The number of items in one's home depended on one's economic status. While some homes were visually inspiring, many people lived in one house. Rooms were often smoke-filled, and clothes were essentially utilitarian. Reworking materials became a Jewish art form. Documents tell of textiles of the 15th and 16th centuries that were burned to recover gold and silver, while others of a fragile nature were often refurbished. Records such as surviving wills indicated that there was a great variety of textiles. Museum collections reflect only a portion of what had been created. Originally, Torah binders were made from swaddling cloth, bleached, prepared, and donated to the synagogue. The artist combined colors and imagination. Women were always defined by the relationship to the man as daughter of, wife of, widowed mother of. This method of signature is recorded on textiles donated to synagogues. Male prestige seems to have always been a constant and a concept that women had to deal with. Despite such concepts, social reality presents to us a picture of diversity and power in Jewish women's lives, past and present. Often women performed the religious commandment of the making of a shroud. Through prayers and cleansing, women played an important role in the burial of the dead. In the general culture of Europe from the 14 to the 1700s, many women were killed as witches and superstitions abounded. Within Judaism, amulets in the Jewish framework were used as preventative measures to keep away the evil eye. The legend of Lilith as an evil spirit, most probably a vision of women tormenting men's dreams, reveals the power of a male-oriented society. The concept of a bad dream becomes a bad omen, and in turn is accepted by women as a reality, looking at oneself through the eyes of another. The women of Tetuan, Morocco, were known for their gold embroidery work, straining their eyes over the most intricate embroideries. Despite geographical locations, it was in the home where ritual observances sanctified life. This Persian Sabbath cloth includes decorations with prayers of the Kabbalah. All parts of life were given religious significance as well as aesthetics, making real the precept of Hidur Mitzvah. This is my God, and I shall adorn thee. Jewish women artists for centuries tried to preserve the indigenous Jewish spirit in their works. The textile industry, begun by women, was taken over by men in the Industrial Revolution of the late 1700s. Embroidery continued as an art form, although the materials were of a lesser quality. Holland, the country that inherited the Italian Renaissance, was where Rembrandt painted. Living in a Jewish quarter, he used many Jews as models, women included. Jews fled to Holland from the Spanish Inquisition of 1492 and the Chelmeniki massacres in Poland of 1648. In the 1700s, many continued their odyssey to England, while the continent was enveloped by mysticism and hopes for the Messiah. During these times, a rare insight into the life of a very accomplished woman is given in the often overlooked autobiography of Gluckel of Hamelin. The process of art education for women is said to have been facilitated by their husbands, fathers, and brothers. In the 17th century, drawing and painting were part of these aspirations of the accomplished family. In particular, these accomplishments were exhibited by the female members in France, England, and Holland. Although not yet part of the overall artistic culture, Jewish women continue to be productive. As the home ceased to be the major work and educational center for women, and although women's work continued, many expected to be secularly educated. Religious education continued through the ritual and domestic aspects of Judaism. In the 1800s, Jewish women were very important in the Berlin salons. It was also a time when Jews were given French citizenship. Despite many conversions to Christianity, Jewish women often remained steadfast when compared to the number of conversions for Jewish men. Modern Jewish women artists were emerging in the general culture. Helena Darmstädter studied in France and exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1907. Lily DeLissa Joseph, an early suffragette, was educated by her brother Solomon J. Solomon, who in turn was educated at the Royal Academy for Art in England. Major upheavals for Jewish women in Russia came with the advent of Haskalah, the Enlightenment of 1860. Jewish women wanted more education. Immigration to the United States and England presented challenges unseen before. Institutions developed to help in the redesigning of Jewish communal life, the Education Alliance in New York and the Ben-Uri Society in England. One aspect of their many services was art education. Secular education and assimilation often caused fractures in the development of a positive Jewish identity, such as Elsa Lasker Schuler, an artist, poet, and intellectual. Women from established German Jewish families made a significant contribution to the modern arts in America, such as the collector Peggy Guggenheim and artists Florine and Carrie Stettheimer. The works of the sisters reflected their social status and were later to be bought by museums of note. Teresa Bernstein of Philadelphia, born in 1887, is still painting today. Her father was a textile manufacturer, and she was married to another successful artist, William Meyerowitz. They were a well-known art couple, committed to their art and their Judaism. They belonged to an early American Zionist group, which included Albert Einstein. Lucy Ann Bloch survived the Depression thanks to the United States government program for artists, the WPA. Her father was composer Ernest Bloch. She was committed to the transmission of Jewish social values. Sarah Berman, an East European immigrant, never received a formal education, yet remained dedicated to learning and her Yiddish roots. Her father painted in the shtetl and decorated textiles. Many immigrant women and their daughters worked as seamstress, salesladies, teachers, union leaders, and communal workers. They became dedicated idealists and ghetto heroines. Louise Nevelson is recognized as the preeminent American woman environmental sculptor of the 20th century before the 50s. Some art critics felt it was too bad that so much talent was wasted on a woman. During difficult times, she taught art at the Education Alliance. She expressed her feelings for the Jewish people with loyalty and pride. Hannah Orloff is, and was, a well-known sculptor of the 20th century. Like artists of the Montparnasse, who were Jewish and highly acculturated, her works often lacked Jewish subject matter, yet she was seen as a Jewish artist. Originally from the Ukraine, she took a journey in 1919 to the land of Israel, a journey that many Jews were to take. Due to pressures on Jews in Russia at the turn of the century, Sonia Delane was sent to an uncle in St. Petersburg for protection. She eventually studied in France, created designs on fabrics, wallpaper, canvas, and developed Orphism with her artist husband, Robert Delane. Her career was essential for their economic survival. She didn't exhibit until after her husband's death. When Jewish artists concentrated on their ethnic roots, they were said to be provincial. And when abstract art became successful, Jewish artists in the forefront were blamed and said to be undermining traditional art values. Jewish men and women artists shared in these 20th century variations of anti-Semitism. Husbands in most art families, Jewish as well, tended to dominate in terms of fame and were taken seriously in the art world. Ruth Geekow, an artist and founder of the American Serigraph Society, was married to the famous artist Jack Levine. Another Jewish art couple was Dorothea Greenbaum, sculptress, who was married to William Zorach. Lenke Rothman, a survivor of the concentration camps, spent many years in a Swedish hospital recovering. Inspired by contacts with Nellie Sachs, she began to create. Remember Us to Life is symbolic of all who died in the Holocaust, where so much of our creative potential as a people was brutally snuffed out. Anita Ree was 48 years old when she committed suicide in 1933 when the Germans destroyed one of her major murals. Frida Kahlo, whose father was Jewish, grew up in Mexico. She constantly dealt with a fractured self-concept and is considered to exemplify women artists and their sufferings. Helen Frankenthaler, a well-known lyrical abstractionist in America, was a gifted child in a successful oriented family. Her father was a New York Supreme Court judge and her husband was Robert Motherwell. Lee Krasner's family was rooted in the Talmud, and she has declared that the manuscripts with gold letters influenced her works. She married Jackson Pollock after her parents died and became known in the 60s for her lyrical expressionism. Louise Kayish, a sculptor from Georgia, reflects the works of many women artists who continued to be inspired and create from Jewish concepts and for Jewish institutions. Lori Gross, born in 1952, received a Jewish education in religious schools and camps. The content of Judaism is the creative essence for her wall hangings and paintings. Davy Hyman worked with the Sisterhood of Temple Bethel in Ohio to develop this canvas-worked embroidery for ark doors entitled Creation. Transmitting Jewish identification today often continues to rely on the Jewish woman in the home, regardless of what type of Judaism is practiced. Audrey Flack, whose roots are in the Jewish community, creates works that emphasize joy in this life and social consciousness. Eva Hess died in 1970 at age 36. As an infant, she was sent to England to escape the Nazis. Her family was subsequently reunited in America. Her sculptures represent for many the vulnerability and absurd in life. Miriam Shapiro was inspired by her grandmother, who taught her needlework and textiles. She is a successfully established artist, and as a Jew, she has a desire to find future matriarchs. Judy Chicago has pushed the limits of her feminist art and has reinvested in looking into her heritage, which includes direct ancestry to the Vilna Gaon. She is working on a major art project concerning the Holocaust and women. Ora Lerman exemplifies the artists given support by Jewish institutions, such as the Jewish Museum. She had tried to search for her father's village, and when unable to do so, she recreated her past. Her works are titled, My Family Needed to Talk Loud and in Several Languages and All at Once. And as the sun sets in Sidlow, geese become golden sand. Mindy Wiesel, born in 1945 in Bergen-Belsen, expresses inner emotions and anxieties formed by the Holocaust in her own life. Pictured here is her work entitled Shensa, her mother's Yiddish name, meaning prettiest. Ruth Weisberg, also born in 1945, exhibited her wonderful talents in a 60-foot scroll commissioned by the Skirball Museum, which tells the story of Jewish women. The non-Jewish community has supported some of her study and works. Ida Appelbrug expresses anguish of the soul and loneliness. Malka Zeldis has been totally immersed in Jewish culture. She is a contemporary folk painter who exhibits a strong sense of Jewish identity and joy. Gay Block is a photographer who has used the Jewish people for her subject matter and self-discovery. Carol Hamoy, inspired by the Jewish feminist questions, is involved in a Jewish women's chavarot. She has created textile assemblages. Ellen Lampert is the Cologne art director thanks to a rare second Fulbright scholarship. Living in Germany has raised questions for her concerning what is Jewish culture. Keturah Eshel, dedicated to raising human consciousness, continues to create new concepts from bead tapestries to collages, using the Kabbalah as inspiration. She works in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Annette Fine from Jerusalem continues in textiles, the rich legacy begun by Jewish women from biblical times. Chava Mehuten is one of many successful Israeli sculptors. She is powerful and evocative. Her commitment is to the people of Israel. Panina Green, born in 1960 in Russia, is an architect who is fired from her job for creating art with traditional Jewish themes. As for the future, Jewish women can be proud of a continuing creative legacy, ever expanding in inspiration, content, and expression. Some dedicating their works to the Jewish people, and some to all people.
And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced all night long. And Miriam was a weaver of unique variety. The tapestry she wove was one which sang our history. With her delight. A woman touched with spirit, she dances toward the light. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. When Miriam stood upon the shores and gazed across the sea, the wonder of this miracle she soon came to believe. Whoever thought the sea would part with an outstretched hand, and we would pass to freedom and march to the promised land?